Hi everyone, it's Jackie at Spare Room Studio here, and I have an exciting video today, an exciting video for me to produce, and that is because I have a sneak peek here at the new release of Fantasy Tiny Homes by R.J. Hampson. Now this isn't a new book, he has already released this book quite some time ago. However, he's been working really hard at revamping the second set of images so that there are subtle changes like there are in his newer books. But he's also done something a bit different with this book in that he's changed some of the original drawings as well. So if you do own the original version, you will see that there are a few different pictures from the first edition. Now, I did talk about in my R.J. Hampson collection video that if there was ever a book that I'd like a second copy of, then it would be this one, because I kind of trashed this original copy. I've got pages falling out, I've got lots of alcohol marker yellowing, and I ruined some pages with gesso, having experiments and so on. And recently, or last month, I actually was selected as one of his email subscribers to win a copy of any book of my choice, and I decided that this was the book that I would like. And Russell let me know that he was working on revamping some of the earlier editions, and if I wanted to wait, that I could wait for the new copy, and I'm so glad I did. I'm really excited to have this newer copy in my hand. Now, I'm not going to give you a full flip through because this is just a sneak peek, and what I will do is I'll show you a couple of the pages that have changed, and I'm going to work on a new page. So in the original copy, this one is called Observatory, and this is the one that I'm going to have a go at colouring today in the new version. And this is the new version of the Observatory. And so I'll do my best here to show you side by side. It is quite a different picture, so I'm really excited about that because I do have the second version of this one to have a go at again. Now I have this newer version, and also in the back of the book the subtle changes have happened again with the second copy of images. And so we have the observatory there that we could possibly do as a daytime image or leading to nighttime. And here we have a nighttime version of the image. So that's really exciting. And one of the other pages that I'm really keen on showing you will be coming up, but this page here is different from the original version, and so is this one. And they're interspersed with, these are the same as the original book. So I won't spoil the fun for you because I think it would be really good to go through and pick those differences for yourself. And I'm not sure on the release date for this new version, but perhaps if you keep an eye on Amazon or Russell's webpage or his Instagram page, you will see that release date coming up. So this page here, mine has fallen out of the original book because I used so much water on it. I loosened all the glue binding up. So we'll just move that original book out of the way. And here is my original version, and here is the new version. I really don't want to break my spine yet, but I'm going to have to at some stage or other, so here we go. I'll just loosen that a little bit. So there's the difference between those two pages. So it's almost like a completely different design. It's the same concept, but he's added lots of different details, changed some things about it, and I just think that is just so much fun. I really like it. So there you go. There's your sneak peek. I'm not going to show you too many of the differences because I'd really like you to find those yourself if you're interested in purchasing the book. And they're always very easy to purchase through Amazon, and then you can go to Russell's website or his Instagram page and look at other ways that you might be able to purchase some of Russell's work. And he's got quite a few books available now, so have a look through. I suggest that you do that because there will be something to suit everybody's interest, I think. So what I'm going to do here is a little demonstration using some Derwent Inktense pencils, because I've had that request recently, and we'll work on this page here for a little while. So this one is the observatory. Now you will hear little pitter-patter of feet again, because I have Hamish wandering around still. I've decided that you know, he's got free rein at the moment to sort of get used to where everything is in the house and my routine, so you will hear some of his pitter-patter of feet. So I've had a couple of comments and requests about how I work with the Derwent Inktense, so I'll give you a little demonstration here. I like to use them in my R.J. Hampson books. I know it's Amazon paper, and if you have an issue with wrinkling and crinkling with your paper, then this is not going to be for you. However, if you can tolerate that, I do like to work in these books with these pencils because I feel that they suit that illustration style very well. So along with my markers, I like to incorporate a little bit of the watercolour type effects as well. And I'm quite happy to wear a little bit of the damage that, well, I'll reframe that. I do a lot of damage to my books. But unfortunately, my first copy of this one, I really did flood it with water, and the whole thing has just given up. And that's not a fault of the book, that's on my part, because I really did saturate it. So what I've done here is I've put a couple of blotter pages underneath to make sure that we don't go onto any of the other pages underneath. And to start with, I wet the paper. It's reasonably wet. I wouldn't go overboard until you get used to doing it this way, but it is reasonably wet. And then what I do with the pencil is lift that little bit of colour just from the tip of the pencil with a water brush. Now you can do this with an ordinary brush and a pot of water if that's your preferred working style. But I do it this way purely because I do work sitting on the sofa or couch in front of the TV quite often, and so it's much more convenient for me to have this water brush and no pots of water and brushes and so on while I'm sitting on the sofa. And so what I do is take a little bit of colour from the tip of the pencil and just drop that into, or touch that into the wet paper, and then I let that colour bleed. Now the paper gets to a point where it starts to dry and you won't get any of the bleeding effect. And that will be quite obvious when you start to do this. You'll see what I mean by that. As always, when you're trying a new technique, I highly recommend that you don't choose one of your favourite pages or books to work in while you're actually practicing with your techniques. Eventually, when you come to use your book, you're going to have to sacrifice a page somewhere, whether it be at the back or one of your least favourite images, because you're going to have to see how it actually reacts on that particular paper. But for practicing your actual techniques, I suggest that you have a working book that you're not terribly bothered about ruining, and practice all these techniques into one particular book first. And then when you're feeling much more comfortable, then choose a page in another book where you need to work out how the paper is going to react, and then you choose a page that you're not particularly invested in, or if it's something like a Johanna Basford book or a Kirby book, there's quite often a space at the back where you can test your pencils and your technique in the back without ruining any of your favourite designs, and then give this a go. Now you'll see that I'm not being particularly careful here with clouds either. I try not to go over them as much as I can, but obviously sitting here on camera, I'm not in my most comfortable working position either. So there are going to be errors, but it really doesn't matter because I'm working with these Inktense so lightly at this stage, the washes are so pale, that if I want to come back and make those clouds very white, I can use a white acrylic paint pen or a good white pencil. Prismacolor white pencils work the best in my experience. And you can reinstate those white areas with other methods. As long as you haven't put too dark a colour onto them, it will cover up. So you secure a jelly roll pen, for example, all of those sort of white products. Now, it could be that you don't want your clouds to be perfectly white anyway, because I'm actually suggesting here that this is, later in the day into the early evening when we're starting to go darker. He's waiting for darkness and the stars to start appearing. And so those clouds will not appear to be bright white anyway. So I can always come back with another colour to suggest that. It could be that I want to suggest that they're the early stages of rain clouds or whatever. So all is not lost. It does not have to be brilliant white. So I think at this stage, and I'm scrubbing the paper a little bit here, but I would suggest you don't do that to start with because it will tear your paper up. It does disturb the surface of the paper a lot. And until you've worked quite a few times with them in this way, you won't necessarily know at what point you can get away with that before you have to pull back, and that will come with practice as well. So I'm hoping to leave a little bit of a sort of lighter area here because I don't know, I think it's just sort of suggesting maybe there's a light source glowing, or it's just interesting to me. I don't necessarily have a full reason for why I choose to do things and leave things the way that I do, other than I'm not always a huge fan of seeing lots of saturated area with no variation. So if I worked with alcohol marker, that would be fair enough. Block colour with alcohol marker is highly expected and part of their selling point or their feature. Whereas with these pencils, I'm not wanting that look with these pencils. I'm actually trying to get a bit of a watercolour effect going on with the Inktense. So here I'm just gently patting the edges of that with the damp brush to soften any hard edges and just get it to look a little bit more blended. So this is just another method that you can do. Now, it has been said many times, and I will say it again, that these pencils are not watercolour pencils. They're not designed to be, they're not marketed as watercolour pencils, and I know that they're not watercolour pencils. But working in this manner, you can mimic a lot of watercolour effects, even though this is ink. I haven't worked with ink on its own before, so I can't comment on how you know, trying to get a watercolour wash with an ink works, because I've never done that myself. But the formulation of these pencils can be used in a manner that mimics some of the effects of watercolour. But when this dries, this is no longer going to blend or move, especially because I'm using it in such a pale way. If it was heavily saturated and not activated fully, it could still move. But I'm using this in a very, very light, soft wash. And so the chances of this moving once that it is completely dry is very slim. So I'm just choosing a couple of different greens here. The first green was light olive. This one is leaf green. And the sky was deep indigo. So what I like to do on the first pass with the pencils is a very, very light wash. And this time I'm not wetting the paper first. I'm just using a very, very gentle touch to the tip of the pencil, lifting a tiny bit of colour off of it and working onto the dry paper, and I'm not saturating the paper in any way here. It's lightly dampened, but it's not really wet. And what I can do by working that way is that it is looking more smoothly blended than how I worked up there. Up the top in the sky, I was really wanting to go for that very varied look of the colour rather than a solid colour. I was going for the variations. Here I'm going for a little bit more regular. It's not highly blended, but it's a much more regular look of colour than I was up there. And it is a grassed area, but I feel like this is a scene in the distance, and you would not see every blade of grass when you're looking at a scene in the distance. What you will see is that there are variations in the colour from light to dark where it changes, but you are not going to see every blade of grass and every detail. And so therefore I don't want to replicate that. What I want to do is just give you a suggestion of changes in colour, so you know that it's not a regular smooth surface. It does have variations, but it is not going to show you every single blade of grass, nor do you need to see every blade of grass. That's my opinion, but that's how I'm approaching this. Also, this is an illustration, and it's a fun illustration. It's not a realistic image. It's a what I would term as almost like a comic illustration. There's a lot of humour in it. And so you can play with lots of different types of techniques to get different looks, because you don't need this to look like a photograph. You don't need it to look like a real scene. It was not intended to be a real scene. Okay, so I'm just going to clean my brush off there. So that was the leaf green, and we'll let that dry a little bit. I'm feeling, because it's later in the day and it's starting to go dark, those colours won't be super bright, and it's a little bit in the distance, but perhaps down here, this is where we can use the vibrant, brighter colour, because he is the focus of the picture, really, him and his telescope and so on. And this is very important to the picture, but it's not necessarily the highlight of the picture. That's how I'm interpreting, and that's how I want to portray it. So, okay, so while that's drying, I'm going to come down here and work in this area a little bit. And I'm not sure what colour telescopes would be. My instinct is that they would probably be dark and maybe black or charcoal grey or something like that. But I'm actually going to suggest that this is made of gold or brass because I feel like if I keep the subdued colours back there, this bit here at the front will be fun if I introduce the brighter colours. So I'm using a combination here of sienna gold and Sicilian yellow, and you can see that sienna gold is by far my most favourite colour out of this set, very closely followed by the Sicilian yellow. And again, I've used the damp brush to lift the colour from the pencil tip, and I'm putting that onto the dry paper. Now, if I get to the point where I feel like I haven't been able to portray that this is brass or gold, I've always got the option to introduce some metallic gel pens at the end, or if you have a watercolour paint like the Calero, is it Gansai Tambi, Starry Colours or something like that, or any sort of metallic watercolour or acrylic paint, feel free to use those if you don't want to have a practice at trying to portray that colour or that effect yourself with colour. I sort of go between both methods because sometimes I just can't be bothered trying to replicate a metal when there's a perfectly good pen that will do the same thing. But with pen, I don't like to actually, I don't like to do huge areas with the metallic pens. So I would normally bring the pen in just to do some of these little interesting brackets and screws and all those sorts of features rather than the whole lot. And now I'm going to introduce amber and mustard into this mix. And this is a great example here. You might be able to see how my method of working, I use almost every last bit of that pencil tip. I'll actually go through that and it will fall off in the end, but I could also use that in a palette by putting water onto it and letting it dissolve. So there's very little waste with an Inktense pencil. You will of course go through them a lot quicker if you colour with them directly onto the paper and are sharpening them a lot and you're risking the breakage and so on. You will go through them a lot quicker if you work in that manner. But if you choose to have a go at working in this way, you will find that these pencils will last you a very long time. You'll get a lot of pictures out of your pencils working this way. So there I've just added a little bit of the mustard onto there, and now I'm also going to add some amber just on the very edges at this stage. And at the moment I'm not looking to finish any particular element of this page at all. I'm skipping around bits and just getting a base layer of colour on very lightly at this stage because I don't know at this point exactly what I want to be the biggest focal point. And so if I go too dark too soon, that forces my hand, and there are things you can do to disguise and eliminate some things, but only to a point. And at this point, I don't want to be forced to deal with any of those sorts of decisions, or I don't want to use the word mistake, but any of those decisions right at this stage. So that's how I would approach having a go here at starting off either a gold or a brass kind of effect. I might have to do this in two parts because it will just be easier to wait until it has dried. But I could come back perhaps and show how I would age that or work on that a little bit more. Sometimes I add coloured pencils at the very end, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I manage to create exactly the look that I'm wanting just with these Inktense pencils, and I don't need to introduce anything else into it. And that is not a decision I make at the beginning. That's a decision that is made as I go along. So you keep evaluating as you go along. But most of my pages, I start out by thinking that I am only going to use one type of supply. And then as the picture progresses and I'm evaluating each stage, then I introduce other things as they're needed to sort of create, you know, the final product. It's very rare that I actually start out at the beginning and know exactly what it's going to look like at the end. I don't plan that. I don't plan that much in detail. So this is back to the deep indigo. Because I've used it in the sky there, I'm going to reintroduce it back down here so that we've got that continuity of colour, and we've got the idea that you know, there's a cohesiveness and a relationship between the elements on the page. And if you find that your water brush has just got that little bit too wet, just dab it off on your paper towel. I've got paper towel here. You can use paper towel, you can use tissues, you know, an old fabric rag, or, you know, whatever you've got to hand. And so when you see me keep dabbing at the paper towel with the brush, sometimes it's to remove some colour because I've got a little bit too intense a colour on there. And other times it's to clean it off and get a new colour. Or it could be that the brush is feeling just that little bit too wet. And so I'll dab it off and dry it and then pick the little bit of extra colour back up again. Now because I'm just taking that tiniest little dab off each time, I'm not wasting any of the pencil really. That little tiny bit there that is coming off, you know, it's not going to make much difference to the whole scheme of things in terms of waste. So don't feel like you're wasting your product if you're doing that. And that's just sort of something that has evolved as I've been working. That's what I found works best for me. Now over here I'm going to do his trousers in the same colour as his jacket, like he's got a suit. It's very much a steampunk type of Victorian gentleman. And I tend to think of their clothes as quite often being brown. I don't know why, that's just some assumption that I've come to in my head. But I didn't want him to be brown because there's going to be lots of brown introduced into these other elements. So I want him to have navy or blue suit. And I think I'll have a matching top hat for that. And again, I've really got very little colour there. This is going to end up being built up a lot as I go along. But to start with, I just want to get that idea of colour down so that when the whole picture has got some colour on it, then I can decide what needs to be deepened and strengthened to become the focal point, what needs to be highlighted with a bit of white for a highlight. And these very soft mid-tones are going to work really well then, because they can be lightened and they can be darkened. So I think that will be enough. I think I'd like his waistcoat to be a different colour. And I think I might go for a sort of nice deep red or burgundy Shiraz type colour there. I think there is a pencil called Shiraz, if I remember correctly. Yes, here we go. This one's called Shiraz. And what I'm doing it as well is keeping in mind that I want an overall vintage, faded, dusty look. And I'm going to bring little pops of vibrancy in to accentuate it. This is sort of the type of picture that I'm thinking of, like, you know, old vintage photographs, hand-coloured photographs and images and so on, where the colour has faded a lot, but we'll bring those little sort of extra pops of colour in here and there just to make that real visual interest. So it's not going for 100% accuracy or vibrancy, but it's just bringing in the interest. And I feel like I'd like his shoes to be very dapper. And I will do I might actually do the whole lot. Sometimes I feel like these tips of the shoes should be a different colour, but I'm just going to go for the one colour there. So now we want a wood, well, I want a wood colour for this coat stand, and what I'm going to do is use the amber and mustard that I've used in the telescope, again for the continuity, and then we can always introduce a deeper brown to suggest the form and the shape, but the overall colour is going to be very similar to the telescope there. And so for the table that it's on, I will start introducing that darker. And I'm going to go for oak because it's quite a cool brown, whereas all this is very warm. And if I brought in a warm brown there, I would feel like it was just a little bit too much of the yellow or orange tones, and then this is going to fade away again. So by bringing in a cooler shade of brown, it's going to make this a bit more interesting and a bit more vibrant to draw the eye, because the stand that it's on is not, you know, the focal point. It's the telescope that's the focal point. And we'll introduce a little bit of that into there. At this stage, I'm just letting all the colours blend together. When you work with watercolours out of a tube or a pan, you know, it's very, very easy to mix colours on a palette, and also to work wet in wet with watercolour paper. You let the colours blend on the paper as well. And we can achieve a little bit of that with working in this manner. And because I'm trying to mimic that watercolour look, what I'm looking for is that very, very loose interpretation of blending. I'm not looking for very, very smooth or highly blended look of colour. I'm actually looking for that washy, haphazard, random, almost accidental blending of colour. I hope that makes sense. If anything that I say while I'm doing this doesn't make a lot of sense, please do put a question in the comment section, or a comment there, and just, you know, ask me what hasn't necessarily made a lot of sense, and if I can describe it a little bit better for you. What I'm finding is when I'm chatting away while I'm working like this is that I am chatting a bit on automatic pilot, and sort of chatting as I'm thinking and going, and I haven't planned this ahead of time. And sometimes when you're using your brain for creative work, I'm just going to give him the same coloured hair. when you're using your brain for this sort of creative work, using the speech part of your brain is actually quite difficult. Some people make it look really, really easy, and hats off to them. Like, I really am. I have a newfound admiration for a lot of people that I've been watching on YouTube for years, that they make it so, seem so effortless and natural, but it really does need a bit of practice. So yeah, if you feel like I haven't explained something properly, or you'd like a little bit more in-depth explanation of it, do just put a comment and let me know what it is I haven't explained properly, and I'll do my best to help you out. So again, just putting a little bit more of a deeper brown into there now that it's dried. As you put successive layers on top of the dried areas, you're going to get more of that dried hard edge look. If I didn't want that, I'd have to keep patting the edge of it like this with the damp, clean brush to soften that hard edge. But again, you know, there are two sorts of people. There are the people who want everything to be really finely blended and the colours to transition really smoothly. And there are other people who actually do like that hard-edged look and variation, because it's all very much a personal preference type of thing. Now, I feel like he should be an orange cat down there, so I'm going to use red oxide for him. Just to sort of get that redness going, and then I can put a little bit of orange or yellow in there to make it more orange if I feel like it. But I feel like the red sort of is going to blend in with this, and I might actually introduce a little bit of that into his waistcoat there, because what that does then is that implies, you know, your eye is going to see the similarity, and it implies that there's a relationship between those two items rather than them just being randomly placed on a page. I've left the seat there because I don't really know what colour I want that seat to be just yet. So I've got a good idea of what colours I've got going on down here now. They're a base, and I can introduce some vibrancy later. So for example, this one here is cadmium yellow. I can introduce that into the areas where the light would be catching it most, and suddenly that livens that up a bit. And remember, when you've finished and it's all completely dry, you can always add some coloured pencil. All right, so I don't put it everywhere, because then it's going to lose that vibrancy and that pop if I put it in too many places. I'm thinking, I don't really know what observatories look like. Can't say that I've seen too many. I might have to Google that, but I was thinking about perhaps trying to somehow suggest that they are glass. And so then there could be maybe a glow of a light source showing in it. Not quite sure how I'm going to do that yet, so that might be something I have to come back to, or you will see this in completed pages at the end of the month, or if you follow me on Instagram, you will see it on Instagram. So I'm going to introduce some Payne's Grey here now. I like the Payne's Grey because it's got a very blue tinge to it, so it's going to work really well with that deep indigo. And I quite often like to suggest paving stones in a grey, and depending on your picture, you choose whether it's a warm grey, cool grey. In your marker sets you get green greys, yellow greys. You know, you choose which one suits the overall theme of your page the best. But I like to sort of do a base of that grey and then start to add in perhaps a bit of green for moss or a bit of brown for there's dirt. So let's bring back in, I think maybe we'll go for the leaf green. It's got a slightly yellower tinge than what the olive has. And so I just put little bits of that here and there just to suggest that there might be a little bit of moss or weeds or something growing on or around the paving stones. Because once again, I feel like if something is all one colour, it gets very, very boring. And, you know, this way it's much more interesting. The eye will sit on there for a little bit without being distracted by it. This is amber. It won't get fully distracted by it, but it makes it you know, a little bit of visual interest. And it sort of suggests and introduces that there's texture, there's age, there's more going on than it's just, you know, a big expanse of concrete or cement. And there's some design elements going into that. And this is, again, still the amber. I'm just going to do a very, very light suggestion into the steps because I'm not sure yet what colour my steps would be. And I'm going to add that into the base there of the building. I've got it in my head, I don't know why. Once again, I haven't researched what an observatory looks like, but I'm thinking white. And so I don't want this to be too dark. I want it to suggest that maybe it's some aged stone. We've got a little bit of wood perhaps there and a little bit of age up here, but I think the walls might end up being white. And it's okay, you don't have to colour every single aspect of a page in a colour. You can actually leave the white of the paper and that will really make your other colours pop. But of course something that's white isn't going to be completely white, especially over a building of an age. So we'll leave the majority of the walls white, but we're going to put little tiny dobs of colour here and there, which just suggests a little bit of age, a little bit of dirt, a bit of grunge. And also it just makes it that little bit more interesting for your eye. Now where's that Payne's Grey again? I'm just going, with the Payne's Grey, I'm going to just put a little bit of colour in here to suggest a shadow. So please do let me know in the comments whether you would like to see me actually finish this on camera or whether you're just happy to see completed pages and photographs on Instagram. But if you'd like to see me actually finish this on camera, please do let me know, and I can do a part 2. So even if they stay as white pillars and white, you know, details, the Payne's Grey very, very lightly is just suggesting a little bit of shadow in there, and I feel like that might be in shadow there. and a little bit under there. So you can see that, hopefully you can see that starting to take some form. And we'll do a little bit, get that amber again, because I've used amber up there. We'll do a little bit of amber there, but I'm going to bring more shadow here because you're closer to it. Everything in the background is going to be a little bit more of a mid-range of colour, because you're not going to see lots of detail and strong differences, you know, further away. Those things tend to all blend together the further away that you get from something. And I'm going to introduce a little bit of Payne's grey down here to suggest some shape to that leg, perhaps a little bit of a shadow. Not sure what I want to do that middle section yet, whether that's going to be like an inlay feature, which might look nice with some different colour. And under that cup there will be a bit darker. The inside of his coat is going to be darker, because I'm going to suggest that that's got a lining in there, and a little bit of shade under his hat. So I'm starting to work on, you know, some of those details, and this can all still be continued to be darkened up as I go along. So I think I might leave that there for this particular video. As I mentioned, if you do want me to finish it on camera, please let me know. So I've used a decent range of pencils there to get to that point. I may not introduce many more colours into that now. We'll see as that goes along, or whether I use perhaps coloured pencil will introduce a few different colours. So that's how that sky is looking. It's still quite damp, it hasn't dried yet. We are basically in winter here now where I am, and the weather has cooled right off, and we've got a little bit of rain, so it's a bit damp and things are not necessarily drying as quick as they used to for me. So that's how that page is coming along. And just to safeguard that, so this is again R.J. Hampson's Fantasy Tiny Homes. This is the new edition that is going to be released very soon. Another little sneak peek of some pages. This is cool. This is really different to the original one. And then of course you've got your second set of images at the back that have got darker skies on some of them, and they've got some really different changes in the composition. Extra characters, or characters have been taken away, or there've been you know, different changes. So there's the observatory, and that's the version that I'm doing. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. Please do go visit Russell